Hey everybody, welcome to Ask Dr. Testosterone, starring Dr. George Touliatos. Today we have a very special guest. He's a scientist in the field of human performance. He is the author of the very, very popular Anabolics, which is currently it's in 11th edition. Wow, 832 pages. He's also the founder of Molecular Nutrition. Please welcome Bill Llewellyn to the show. Hi, how are you, sir?
I'm well, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Okay.
Hello, Bill. Thank you for accepting my invitation. And we met, I think, last year. Yeah, it was last September, actually, in Denver. It was the first time that I had a joint over there in Colorado. And
Yes,
thank you for the whole hospitality. Yes. Bill was my hero because during my early years in bodybuilding, I was reading his books.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, yeah, I had the 10th edition of the Anabolics. And we started interacting on Facebook in 2014, I think. So I mailed him my latest book in Greek. He found it really interesting, but he told me, I don't know what you're writing inside. I hope it's good. And you basically do what I do in the States the past 10 years. So yeah, we had something in common, the passion about the chemical enhancement field. And later, Bill gave me an opportunity of a lifetime to write in his, to be a columnist in his Anabolic Org website. And after 1 year, he popped me out the greatest thing. I mean, it was a great privilege for me to be a contributor in his Anabolics book. So I wrote a chapter over there about the intramuscular abscess, and Thomas O'Connor also. He's also a contributor, and I'm really proud about this thing because it's my name on the top of this book, and it's the best reference, of course, worldwide regarding PED's use. So I'm looking forward if Bill, of course, wants to be part of the next edition. And yes, let's talk about your what you're going to launch next year. Of course, we can talk about the steroid kit.
Well, Doctor, Dr. T, let's give the viewers a little background because I don't think everyone knows Bill's story. I consider him the foremost authority on PED use, but I want to know, where did your interest begin? When did you decide that you were going to take a scientific approach to this and really do the research that very, very few other people in the world are willing to do or able to do?
It started with a personal interest, and first I want to just go back to George. It's certainly my honor to have you contribute to the book. You have, without a doubt, proven yourself to be a tremendous resource in our field, which is too often overlooked by the medical community, or ignored, or that thing. And so it's certainly been great having you contribute, and without a doubt, we look forward to having you contribute to the 2012 edition too. So certainly thank you. In regards to my interest, it started. Look, I've always been a bit of a nerd. 30 years ago in school, I was a nerd before it was even cool to be a nerd. So that's kind of just my thing. When I got interested in anabolic steroids, I think I was 17, I just couldn't use drugs without knowing what they were, how they worked, what their risks were. So when I was first getting interested in it, I picked up Dan Duchesne's Underground Steroid Handbook too, which was, the book at the time, certainly. And the views that Mr. Duchesne had presented, they were mind-opening, because this is around the time that, we had the Ben Johnson scandal with the Olympics, and steroids were becoming really, big topic. And, so I was bombarded with this message in the media about how dangerous, deadly these substances were. And certainly there are risks to the abuse of these substances. But reading Duchesne's book, it presented it in a whole different view. That certainly the risks were being overplayed. poorly understood, I think, by people that were reporting on these drugs. So he presented another viewpoint, and it created this thirst for me for knowledge, really to understand these drugs, how they work biochemically, what their risks are, what their benefits are, how to mitigate the risks. And it just became a fascinating subject. And it's funny, I was really into computers when I was younger. And then I got into weight training and into this subject, and it just snowballed into essentially was a core of, I guess, my career, just studying these substances, and of course I had a fairly prominent history using them as well. So
yeah, I'm curious, when was your first edition of Anabolics released?
2000.
Wow, so 20 years you've been doing this. Wow.
Yeah.
Bill, I think it was Bill Phillips also who released something about the steroids.
He put a book out there. He was pretty prominent as well.
Okay.
I liked, Duchesne's book was so
Underground.
Yes, it was, but he distilled the knowledge in a really easy to read, easy to comprehend way, and certainly it wasn't the be all end all of research on this subject, but it was enough to really drive my interest.
It was purely experimental thing,
Yeah, I believe it was only about 100 pages, that book, the Underground Steroid Handbook.
It was a handbook.
Yeah, something about that.
Wasn't very long.
It's for me, it's kind of almost like a full circle thing, because one of the projects that I'm working on right now, I don't have a title for it, but in addition to the 12th edition, which we're going to be working on very soon, I would like to put out something that is more along the lines of what Duchesne did, very distilled, essential knowledge kind of thing, where somebody that's interested in anabolics, considering it, while certainly we work very hard every edition to put as much knowledge and cutting edge science in there as we can. I do believe that the community needs a book that can be read cover to cover, with a couple of sittings, and just present the most important information, the stuff that I wish I knew. I made a lot of mistakes when I was young, didn't understand the drugs, even as I was learning, took risks that I didn't need to. That's what I want to present in that book, hopefully, which we get a chance to do that as well this coming year. Just to take somebody that is new to the subject, really wants to understand it, they can go through the book, and by the end of it, at least have some really great harm reduction advice, some core knowledge about the substances, and it hopefully will spark their interest, like my interest was sparked, and at least for some people, and they can continue to research and get involved with it. It's a fascinating subject. Muscle growth is, I think we all know, is tremendously complex and fascinating, and this is a very interesting aspect of it. So
yeah, different types of drugs. I mean, we learn about the meldonium and Sarapova that use it to enhance the tennis. It was about cardiovascular issues. So it's not just about anabolic steroids. It's about growth factors. It's about antiestrogenics. It's about diuretics, different compounds. And the breakthrough of this book is that you have about 50 pages colored about the counterfeit, the legitimate pharmaceutical grade steroids, and then you have also the steroid kit that you can identify the legitimate substance, but not qualitative. That means quantitative. I'm sorry. You cannot speculate how many milligrams are over there, at least to know if it's a substance. So you're going towards the correct direction.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I haven't had a chance. We haven't had a chance to connect recently. That things have been so crazy. We just released what we call semi-quantitative. It's just for trenbolone, nandrolone, and testosterone. But we worked with the team at the lab. It's something that I have wanted to do for so long, because I felt that we could, if we standardized the amount of drug that we were testing in the test kit. So it's not quantitative in the sense of a lab test, But we can get a range. Is it roughly 50 milligrams, 100, 150? Is it 200? So there's like 4 steps of color grading where you should get a pretty good idea if it's accurately dosed or if it's an underdosed product. So, which is, underdosing and substitute ingredients are 2 tremendous problems on the black market right now. So,
yeah, where's that available, Bill? Roid Test.
Roidtest.com is our website.
Roidtest.com.
Yeah.
I remember you gave me two kits about G8, and when I came back home, I dropped a tiny droplet of G8, and the color changes, and I verified this by the IGF-1 levels, so it was correct.
The GH test, man, I am so happy that we have this GH test. We launched Roid Test in 2015, and it's probably it's got to be the most common substance that we hadn't tested for. When are you going to do GH? When are you going to do GH? But growth hormone is a fragile, complex protein. I have seen other companies go out there with a kit that's reagent based, which is an acid. It just breaks down substances. That's how the Roid Test kits work. It breaks apart the steroid and it looks for reactions with certain parts of it. But the growth hormone test, that's something I said, first off, you can't do it with reagents. It's just going to break it down into amino acids. It's not going to give you useful information. So for a long time, I told people I'd love to do it, but I don't think we're going to do it. And then we connected with this brilliant chemist in Europe, applied the technology similar to pregnancy test. It's antibody based. We have these test strips that are literally impregnated with antibodies to growth hormones. So it's super specific. I mean, I wish we could do this with everything. So this thing is so specific. So when you get a reaction to growth hormone on our test, you can be very confident that you have growth hormone. I believe the only thing that might be able to give it a false positive for somatropin is somatren, which is 1 amino acid off. And in working with labs, I haven't spoken with somebody in a lab that has seen somatrem in years. So it appears that all the production labs, in China mainly, that have been producing growth hormone, they were producing somatrem years ago because that was the known synthesis. It was protropin, right? That was the first thing we had here in the U.S. But they've got the synthesis fine for somatropin for the correct 191 amino acid sequence.
Let me ask you. Many people refer that the potency of a GH pharmaceutical grade, for instance, genotropin by Pfizer, to Chinese cheaper GH. Now, according to your experience, the potency that it works, is it the same, or perhaps I wouldn't say underdosed, but 4 IUs of genotropin are, for instance, 8 IUs of the Chinese thing. What do you think about this?
Well, I'll tell you this. First off, and the complex protein that is GH and its manufacture and stuff is not an area that I particularly have expertise in. But my understanding of growth hormone is this: it's more than just the assembly of the amino acids. The folding of the protein has to be correct. There is the possibility to produce a low quality growth hormone product. However, the purest growth hormone product that we ever tested was one of the Chinese brands.
Really?
I forget. It was one of the tops, the red tops or the green tops or something that I'd have to go back and pull up the lab report. It's been so many years. But we compared that to a name brand European product that came from the pharmacy, which was fine, by the way. But the name brand product was slightly off its potency, and the Chinese product was absolutely pure. It had like 1 spike on the report. It was beautiful. But that's one example, so it is possible to have a product that has, for whatever reason, it's been degraded, protein hasn't produced properly. You can have weaker growth hormone, but in my experience, the labs, the good labs over there in China that are making the popular branded products, they're generally good. Mind you, there's a lot of counterfeits of them out there. So you have to be sure you're getting one of those legitimate products. But in my experience, they've been pretty good. The branded Chinese, Chinese GH products. But it's like anything. It's a non-regulated market. It's all underground stuff, and it all depends on where you're getting the product from and how they're taking care of it.
Yeah, I'm curious, Bill. We have so much information available today online, but I feel like it's too much information. It's overwhelming, and there's too many people who are self-proclaimed experts. A lot of these young guys now, they're getting their information about how to properly use steroids from YouTube video guys who are like 23, 25 years old, who are touting themselves as the foremost authorities on anabolic steroid and other PED use. Do you see this excess of information and availability, access to it, as a good thing or a bad thing? Do you think people were better off 20, 30 years ago when they didn't have all these options?
Look, I'm a big IT guy. I love access to information. I think our access to information, of course, is amazing. It's better than it has ever been. But you definitely bring up a good point. There is, in any subject, there are authorities that provide great information. And there are a lot of people now with you can also publish so easily nowadays. You can make yourself a figurehead of a particular topic or cause, whatever it is. And if you can get the reach on social media, you can get, you get a lot of attention and you can be taken seriously. And I think not knocking anybody that's out there working to learn about these substances and educate others. I think that's awesome. But it does create, I believe, an opportunity where, and again, any subject, I think it's always good straight off to try to get find a good source of knowledge, good source of information, good book, good video, good training program, whatever have you. Start with that, learn the basics, and then you're better equipped to figure out who actually has done the research, who knows what they're talking about, and who is just a YouTube gym educated person on these substances. So there's a lot of great information out there. There's a lot of great writers and researchers, and there's a lot of bad information out there. And as we know with all the politics and stuff, bad disinformation, stuff that's that may seem exciting, spreads really fast, whether or not it's valid. So, yeah.
I believe the references play a major role, because when you asked me to write columns for you, you told me, George, I need at least 5 references. So, and I remember Michael Scully telling me, work by evidence. So whatever you say, you have to make sure there is some data, official data, So yeah. It's not just about the broad science of the experience. You have to know to work by evidence and by scientific data and match together, Yeah. Like Thomas O'Connor says, perhaps we just don't know why PCT doesn't work, but also he puts into endocrinology and the HPTA, suppression. And I believe the best combination is experience along with science.
Absolutely. I've always tried to be focused on what's backed by research. I try not to speculate too much on particular subjects if there's nothing there behind it. A good example is like people have been saying forever, and I've made similar observations. I think most people have. Nandrolone tends to be good for many people if their joints are, they're pushing their joints a little bit. It seems to help. And for a long time, I kind of, I may have passed that information along. People say, but there's not a lot of evidence. Recently, there was a study that did support that. So that's the type of thing that I would like I like to embrace with my work. Not fill it with speculation. Although when there's anecdotal information that seems strong.
Well, it's about aldosterone and retention, but the main thing about DECA is the DECA-DIC and the allegedly they're assuming prolactinemia. So does it elevate prolactin? Under what circumstances? The estrogen have to elevate also. So combined with another estrogenic agent, you know, and there is a big, I mean, the 19 testosterone derivatives, do they have progestational activity or just a rumor, you know?
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I mean, there's pretty good evidence that you know, when you get rid of that carbon at 19, you do create something more likely to bind with progesterone. Nandrolone, it's just a fascinating compound. I love it where you have a drug like or a hormone like testosterone that undergoes reduction by 5-alpha reductase. It becomes significantly more potent in these androgenic target tissues.
But it's reduced to dihydronandrolone, which is less androgenic than DHT.
Exactly.
So it's more friendly for the scalp and the prostate, you know?
Exactly. You have the same biotransformation taking place, but in this case, it becomes milder. So I don't know. It's just, that's one of the aspects of steroids that always fascinated me, is looking at the molecular structure and trying to figure out how it's metabolized, what the metabolites look like.
Another crazy thing is the oxandrolone, the anadrol. So people say it bloats, but as a DHT derivative, it shouldn't convert to estrogen. So, but I remember Patrick Arnold telling me that the metabolites of oxymethylone have higher affinity for estrogen receptors. So that's why perhaps it causes bloating effect, especially when there is already high estrogen environment, perhaps if you stack it with testosterone. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, he had a good explanation for it. You know, one of the things that had frustrated me about anadrol is just that, you know, it's
you used it also. You told me you have used it.
Oh yes. Anadrol was one of the first drugs that I tried, and I blew up on it. You know, it was phenomenal in terms of its growth promoting effects. But you know, it's based on DHT. It's impossible for it structurally to convert to estrogen. I had found some study that looked at the progestational activity, which is possibly could explain some of that estrogenic effect, which is very strong with anadrol. And I had found a study looking at that. There was no appreciable progestational effect. And then Patrick Arnold had surmised that it was that two, I think a hydroxymethylene group. It's been a little while since I had my head in all the
So
structure.
anadrol is given to aplastic anemia in medicine. The point is, do these patients develop gynecomastia or bloating with 50 milligrams of it? I don't know, because it's medically applied in anemic people.
And actually, the dosage medically was often 150 milligrams a day, or
really that much.
More. It's been so long since they've used that in clinical medicine, though. At least, you know, over here, the EPO drugs and stuff have just completely eliminated it. So it's tough to get modern data on it. But yeah, anadrol is a fascinating compound. Nandrolone's fascinating steroid. So.
Speaking about the research studies, you know, there just haven't been a lot of research studies done with the type of polypharmacy that bodybuilders engage in. So we don't know. That's why we have to rely on so much bro science, because what university is going to do a study with, you know, a gram of trenbolone and a gram of equipoise and a gram of test per week and this and that? Do you see that ever changing, or is it an ethics issue where the medical community, the scientific community, is never going to feel comfortable with? Or and there's no reason. Is there any reason for them to ever do that type of research?
Yeah, you know, on the one hand, you wish that there would be that kind of research, controlled research, because we would learn a lot more. Yeah. But you touched on it perfectly. It's an ethics thing. I believe the highest dose that I've seen in a controlled trial was like 600 milligrams of testosterone or something like that, which was phenomenal, like a phenomenal dose, way beyond. But the polypharmacy, the excessive, this stuff is, you just don't study it in a controlled setting. What they do, and they tend to do this, I think, more in Europe. I see more studies coming out of there. They try to follow people that self-report, like, I'm using trenbolone, I'm using this. But, you know, on one hand, the black market is a mess. You don't know if you're using what you think you're using. And it's still not a controlled environment where they're saying, like, okay, we'll take 100 people or 50 people that are using, trenbolone and testosterone in these doses. You don't get that. You don't get that population. You just get a bunch of people that come in and say, I'm using a bunch of substances. So the studies tend to be just studies of observational studies of, polypharmacy without any specific, makeup. And while it's interesting and you can learn a lot of important things, particularly like the cardiovascular effects of steroid abuse, those kind of things. They don't answer a lot of other questions that you would be able to with controlled studies. So it's a very good point. Yeah, we are stuck in a lot of regards with on our own, trying to figure things out, and that does, yeah.
Well, we have some data about the medical implementations of steroids. So muscle wasting, osteoporosis, anemia, and hypergonadism. So using minor doses, for instance, 10 milligrams of oxandrolone, we won't have serious effect on the liver enzymes or on the lipids. But the point is there's no enhancing effect with such a low dose, So athletes are abusing this 10 times fold, and there comes the side effects. Okay, we can speak now about the molecular nutrition and the supplements that you have, the lipid stability, the liver stability, and the X factor, the arachidonic acid, which is your baby.
It is my baby. I've been saying this for years. That's my legacy to our field. I love the anabolics books. I love the research and the work that we do. So it's certainly not to minimize that. I mean, that's a core of what we do here, and we so look forward to each updated book. But arachidonic acid to me is a unique contribution. It's a fatty acid, an omega-6. For years, well over a decade, I think, I was criticized by so many in the nutrition field, selling snake oil, making claims that, arachidonic acid, we've patented as a muscle builder.
Actually, you're not the only one who has this product. Also, there's Universal Nutrition that has also arachidonic acid. So It's not just Bill Llewellyn that believes in that,
No, but we licensed to Universal early on. They still have it. We licensed it to Axis Labs, Gaspari, a fair number of companies. But there's a lot to talk about with ARA. But I'll try.
There is some fear of people that reading this, that is it pro-inflammatory? Well, if I get the whole box, would I develop some rheumatoid arthritis, for instance, or some lupus? The point is, Bill, we need a little bit of omega-6 to trigger the muscle inflammation. Too much of it, too much of cytokines will lead you to other pathways, So we need also some, for healthy balance, we need a little bit of omega-6 to trigger cytokines and for any kind of inflammation, not just muscle inflammation. Too much of it is a problem,
I'm gonna tell you a story I haven't told anybody yet about this, but to get back onto this first, yes, the inflammatory response is core to building muscle, right? We damage our muscle tissues, the body responds. It's not all testosterone and protein synthesis. There's a whole lot of other factors involved with how we grow. Arachidonic acid is one of the first things that's involved with the anabolic response. In short, it's stored in your muscles. It's one of the most abundant places you find arachidonic acid in your body. When you train, you damage your muscles. This disrupts the cell membranes, which releases arachidonic acid. Now, arachidonic acid is rapidly converted to prostaglandins. These prostaglandins appear to mitigate or mediate some of the anabolic effects of training. There's been 5 studies on ARA now, and that's my story in a minute. The last 3 studies came out of New Zealand and Australia. They were published in the last couple of years. And it's phenomenal because this group of universities, and there's a bunch of universities that work on this. I was almost in tears when these studies came out because, here's me getting criticized for years.
It was redemption, eh?
It was. I met Mike Roberts, who's from University of Auburn in Alabama. He met me at a conference in Vegas. And he's like, and this is, years of us funding research and just trying to get accepted by the scientific community, but years of nothing Nobody else taking up the research. So I run into Mike, and he's like, "You're gonna be real excited to hear this." He goes, "There's this group," and he named a couple of the people involved. He's like, "They did a whole series of studies on ARA, and they're coming out." And he goes, "And they found some phenomenal stuff." But they looked at the mechanism stuff. We funded 2 studies that looked at the performance benefits of ARA. It increased strength, anaerobic endurance, muscle mass in the second study. So we had this high level stuff, just overview of what it does, to your performance. But they went in and dialed in on the stuff that we would never have had the funding to do. I mean, this stuff is crazy expensive to do, all these markers and inflammatory markers, and they did everything from inflammation to all these anabolic pathways. And they found that arachidonic acid was key in 3 ways for building muscle. One is satellite cells, the satellite cell cycle. We all understand that as our muscle cells grow, they must pull in more nuclei if they're going to grow after a certain point. They call it the nuclear domain. Your muscle cells get very big compared to other cells in the body, but that's why they're multinucleated. They need many nuclei to manage all of the cellular activity. And at a certain point, the cell gets too big. If it doesn't bring in nuclei, it becomes inefficient. It's not going to grow anymore. So the satellite cell cycle is, we've long understood that this is key. But there's 2 other aspects to arachidonic acid that are fairly, really new. These are fairly new subjects in performance. They're, of course, brand new for arachidonic acid understanding. One is ribosome biogenesis. Now, your ribosomes are the sites, yes, where protein assembly takes place in your muscles. Your muscle cells have this machinery to take your amino acids and assemble them into proteins and build the cells, but it's dependent on the density of ribosomes that are in your cells. And Mike Roberts, who I just spoke about, he presented maybe a year and a half ago, really interesting study that found that non-responders to weight training, they tended to have a poor ribosome biogenesis response. They don't build up new ribosomes as readily as good responders do. So the ribosomes may be one of the key aspects for why some people have a really hard time gaining and other people gain well. Arachidonic acid significantly increased the density of ribosomes in the muscle.
I remember you're telling me that when you stay out of the gym, the arachidonic acid levels become more abundant and elevate. That's why after going to the gym after a long time, you experience rhabdomyolysis, because you have too many stores of arachidonic acid that make you sore the day after. And then the more frequent you train, you deplete your arachidonic acid levels.
Yes, that seems to happen with training. Look, every time we train, we're disrupting our cell membranes. We're releasing fatty acids. Whatever's on that membrane starts to get released. Arachidonic acid, your body uses it, it plays a key role there. But if you're not replenishing that, the levels start to get lower. And we see in trained people, the levels start to get lower. I've long speculated, those studies have been around for a while, that, what happens to ARA levels in your muscles. I have long speculated that the decline in muscle ARA is one of the reasons why we start to plateau. ARA is tremendous for breaking plateau. I love, more than anything, I love somebody to come to me and say, I'm going to give ARA a try. I haven't gained in 6 months, 3 months, whatever. I'm stuck. I am not gaining any more strength, not gaining any more weight. That's the person I love to take ARA, because they go on it 2 months later. I get a phone call from them. They're like, holy shit, I'm gaining I'm sore like when I first started going to the gym. I'm gaining again. It's broke my plateau. So it really is a plateau breaker, and we've really been promoting it, at least in the high dose use, to use once or twice a year when you're stuck in a plateau. You'll way get your money's worth if you're using it like that, and you'll just about everybody sees notable new growth.
You have my interest, sir. I'm going to get some.
I'll send some over to you. Send me your address. Happy. I love to get people trying it. And
Bill, the main concern of skeptical people and who are really prejudiced about this is that, is it pro-inflammatory, or is it systemic inflammation, or is it local inflammation? I remember when I came to Denver and you gave me 4 bottles pro bono, along with other supplements. You told me, as soon as you finish the 4th bottle, make a CRP, C-reactive protein test. And actually I did the high sensitivity and was almost 0.1. That's nothing. It means zero inflammation systemic, but it's localized to the muscle.
Yeah. The first study that we funded was at Baylor University under Dr. Kreider. And he had wanted to do IL-6 to see what was going on in inflammation. That's also a central regulator of inflammation.
Interleukin, yes.
Yeah. So we were, of course, anxious, wanted to see what was going to happen. We had our speculation. We had other studies on inflammation and stuff that didn't seem to be a concern, but this was going to the core of it in our study, in our dosage, and there was a reduction in IL-6. After that study, we really, and some other data, we really started to speculate that ARA, by improving muscle growth and activity in the muscles, it may, and it is related directly to insulin sensitivity. When you have higher levels of ARA in your muscles seem to be more insulin sensitive. That may be lowering inflammation. So it lowered the core marker of inflammation in that study. Now, the guys in New Zealand and Australia, they dialed in deep on inflammatory markers, blood cells, a slew of markers. And again, they found a reduction with those that supplemented ARA. So it seems to enhance the localized inflammatory response, as you'd expect, but by improving your the amount of muscle that you have, insulin sensitivity in your muscle,
Bill,
it seems to lower inflammation.
If you take too much of fish oil, is it counterproductive?
I
So one
believe
against
so.
the other?
I believe so.
So if you eat salmon right after your workout, it's not good.
I don't think it's like that. And there are many benefits and some performance benefits to omega-3s, although they are overblown.
Better to eat a chicken thigh that's plenty in arachidonic acid.
There is a competitive nature, but ARA actually likes to outcompete the omega-3s for storage in your muscle tissues. So we don't find it to be very inhibitive, but some people overdo it. I remember conversations with Charles Poliquin, such a loss that he's not around. He was very big into omega-3s. He was very heavy into supplementing omega-3s. I gave him ARA, and he was doing his phospholipids. He wasn't able to get much store increased with ARA, but he's heavy. I mean, his use of omega-3s was well in excess of what most recommended.
They can affect bleeding time. Too much of omega, they inhibit too much of prostaglandins, that it affects the bleeding and the clotting process.
Yes, you definitely can, and at the same note, it can interfere with.
It's like taking too much aspirin,
Or ibuprofen. Isn't that something a lot of guys pop ibuprofen before their workouts?
That's what started all of this with arachidonic acid. Was the studies that came out a couple decades ago, or give or take, on ibuprofen and acetaminophen inhibiting protein synthesis. That's what started my whole work on this. I was like, wait a minute. What's going on here with inhibiting, and I started digging into it. Okay, it's inhibiting prostaglandin synthesis. Prostaglandins are formed from arachidonic acid. That started this whole thing off. I was like, well, why, if we don't want to inhibit this, well, what happens if we enhance this? So that started my whole work on this. But an interesting note, there was another finding in the studies over in New Zealand, Australia, that arachidonic acid stimulated leukocytosis, or the white blood cell reaction, after training. Now, for years, people ask me, I'm sore, does ARA increase muscle damage? And I always told them the same thing. No, it shouldn't increase muscle damage. It's just going to increase your body's response to it. Actually, hold on a sec. Hey, honey, Ava. My daughter's playing Roblox over there, so hold on a sec.
I see her artwork on the back behind him. My kids are grown, but their artwork's all over my desk too.
I'm going to tell you something. If I could buy stock in Roblox, I'm going to do it, because these kids, that's all they want is money for Roblox, for stuff, and to keep playing, and it's a money hole. I can't believe it. The game's free, but as soon as they start playing, the wallet opens up. But anyway, so what was I talking about? Leukocytosis. So I told people it didn't increase muscle damage. I was wrong. Leukocytosis.
It's inflammation.
Yeah. What it does is it's your body's one of your body's ways to help clear that damage of the cells that have been broken up during training, right? It helps get rid of that, but it instills some damage to the muscle tissues. I wouldn't say it's dramatic, but I think some of that soreness, some of that effect from ARA is your body enhancing that leukocytosis, which is also an anabolic response ultimately. So ARA is fascinating subject. If I do say so myself. It's great that all these universities have looked at it now, and there's research coming out, and I feel like I've passed the torch a little bit. I was afraid that I was going to die having discovered this amazing nutrient for muscle growth, unlocked all of these cool things about it, and that it was not going to catch on, and that was it. When I was out of this industry, when I was gone, it was going to be forgotten. I don't think that's going to be the case anymore because there's too much great science here. But I want to tell you a story before I forget. Is it okay? I'm babbling a lot. You cool, Ron?
Yeah, let's get that story.
So we funded a study. I don't remember when it was, 2007, something like that. It was the first study on arachidonic acid. We funded it at Baylor University. The results came back. The group that took ARA was bigger, stronger, more enduring than the group that took the placebo. However, it was a small group study. To be fair, Kreider warned me about this before we did it. He's like, I want you to do more people. We're going to get better data and more reliable data if we get more people, but we did not have the budget for it. So we kept it to, I think it was 30 people, 30, 32, something like that. We kept it small. So they crunched the data, and we had what we call, without getting into the nerdiness of scientific papers and stuff, they crunched the numbers to try to figure out how reliable the result is, not just what the result is, right? Group A did better than Group B, but let's look at the individuals. How many individuals in this group did better? How many individuals in this group? Crunch the numbers and get statistics on how reliable it is that that we got this finding because of the intervention, the supplement, right? So we got a significant, which is deemed above 95% confidence, right? So we had a significant effect on anaerobic endurance, on anaerobic power, right? So that was like a really strong finding. It's hard to argue with it, at least in this paper. Of course, you need to do follow-ups and stuff, but we got that. But strength, other variables of endurance, they were called what you'd consider statistically strong. They weren't statistically significant. The group that took ARA was still better. They were stronger, again, more enduring. They grew more muscle. But when it came to these findings, we had 80% or better confidence that it was because of ARA. Now, in academia, 80% confidence is great. It suggests there's something to look at, but you don't go and report. In most cases, there are some terrible papers out there that report less statistical strength than this. But you don't go say ARA increased strength because you have a statistically strong finding on a significant finding. So if a researcher that understands this reads the paper, what they should do is say, well, this was significant, these were strong, there's something probably here, we need to follow up with this. However, in the world of sports nutrition, where most people are lay people, they read the abstract, which just reported the peak power finding, and they determined that arachidonic acid was proven ineffective as a muscle builder because of the study at Baylor University. So I spent years telling people, read the fucking paper. Statistically strong finding. They were better in all this. I'm not trying to say you should go out and bet your home on this, but there's something here. Look into it. Stop saying that it was proven.
I remember your arguments online,
I would get into arguments. I was called all sorts of shit.
For weeks.
Patrick Arnold and I had
not only another guy, how you call him?
He's a
Brad.
He's a brilliant guy. I've got a lot of respect for Patrick. It stung a lot one day when somebody was like, "Where's Bill? We haven't seen him here." He's like, "Oh, he's squeezing snakes for his X Factor," calling me a snake oil salesman. that I was so frustrated with the response from the industry at this great science that, I mean, I spent years just like I don't know what I'm doing.
Bill, tell us please about the other two supplements, the liver and the lipid stable, about prevention cardiovascular disease and lipid and liver disease.
Hold on one sec. I want to talk about that. But this is the best part of the story.
Oh.
So we eventually funded another study at the University of Tampa. We went higher with the dose. We got statistically significant variables on everything: strength, power, muscle growth. They gained about a half pound of muscle per week. So over the 8 weeks, it was a significant increase. However, that first study at Baylor has dogged us forever because people in this industry, and it's not to cast aspersions, but they're largely not scientifically trained. They often know enough to read a paper and read an abstract and figure out if something works or something doesn't. But most of the people that were criticizing me didn't have the depth of knowledge, aside from some, like Patrick Arnold is, again, a brilliant guy in our field. They didn't understand what we were looking at. So constantly I would talk to companies. Well, this study proves your supplement doesn't work. We don't want to use it. So we came out, we finally funded when we had the resources to do it again. Studies are expensive, very expensive. So we finally had the resources to do it. We invested again. We got the results. I'd still have people come up to me and say, well, the results are conflicting. Tampa seems to be great. Baylor seems to not show this result. And please, if anybody thinks that, read the Baylor paper, the whole paper, download the whole paper. It's free. You'll see the data. So then I spent years continuing to explain to people the first paper, the second paper reinforces the first paper. This is great science. It wasn't until the Australia, New Zealand stuff came out that we had all this great stuff. It's really hard to argue that there's something here now. But anyway, so I gave a lecture at the ISSN, it was maybe a year and a half ago, something like that, 2 years ago. And I basically explained to the audience my journey with ARA. I even, made some fun about how, people were calling me snake oil salesman and all the criticism that I got, and presented all the new data and stuff. At the end of the lecture, Dr. Kreider, who was in the audience, came up to me and he was, he congratulated me, you stuck with it. This is great. And, you believed in this, and, it was very complimentary. But then Dr. Kreider said to me, he said, with the study that we did, I kind of wish we could have gone back because the data was so close. He goes, there are other ways that we could have crunched the data that I believe would have shown a significant effect. And I was like, thank you, Dr. Kreider. That's awesome. That's thank you. To hear that from you, it was an honor, and it was good. I've got much respect for Dr. Kreider, and I'm not criticizing Dr. Kreider by saying this because he held himself and his group to high academic standards, especially when this was a brand new controversial subject. I think they didn't want to take any liberties, and they wanted to crunch everything very, very carefully and very strict with their interpretations. But he said to me, I wish we could have gone back. We could go back because we could have got you that significant effect. And the other half of me was like, motherfucker. Because for years, this fucking paper was what's stopping me from closing deals, which is what I have to educate people so much on this subject and this paper before they can. And we've got some great deals. Universal, we can get to the scientists at some of these companies, and we could close deals because they can grasp it. But the average consumer, they just read on bodybuilding boards, oh, Baylor it shows it doesn't work. And I was like, man, if they fucking did that, our industry would be different right now in the way it embraces arachidonic acid. We would be 15 years into this. And honestly, ARA is something that I believe I still have a patent on it. It's going to be expired in a couple of years. it's the kind of ingredient that every company should have in its line, because if you're a company that has a creatine, a protein powder, a few basic core supplements, ARA is one of the most core things that you can use to improve muscle growth and improve.
Actually, it's part of the off-cycle therapy. After steroid cycle and after PCT, you introduce arachidonic acid along with beta-alanine and some, EAAs. So it's part of the after the chemical enhancement part. Yeah.
We found, because it's independent of testosterone and stuff, we found it great to use after cycles, because while your body's dealing with that, you're getting an anabolic effect from a totally different mechanism.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say people are going to always grow in their off cycle, when they go off cycle, but it's phenomenal for muscle retention. So it really is. It's one of those core things to muscle growth that everybody needs to understand that's in this field, or is taking this seriously, or their performance seriously. It's that important. It's not just like, and I'm not knocking HMB or something. It's not just like some abstract, like, oh, we found this ingredient, it seems to help a little bit. It's like, forget about a supplement. I'd love to sell you X Factor. I'd love people to support molecular nutrition and what we're doing. But ARA is also a dietary ingredient. If you're not going to invest in a supplement, that's fine. But you still need to be thinking about how much ARA you're getting, how many animal products you're getting in your diet, how much meat. Salmon, chicken, also good sources. Red meat. I believe that our ARA is the reason why old school people always told you red meat. It's about
chicken thigh.
Yeah, and chickens. It's in the fatty areas of meats, various meats.
Also.
Yep. It's in quite a bit. Red meat is one of the most abundant sources of it, the fat, and because it's the fatty cuts of red meat. But it's one of those things that if you don't know arachidonic acid in 2020, if your trainer doesn't know arachidonic acid in 2020, man, you're behind. You're missing out on one of the most important things to consider about your program. And again, this could be outside of supplementation. I'm not trying to just sell a supplement. You need to be thinking, if you're monitoring all your macros and your micros and everything that's going into your diet, and you're not thinking about arachidonic acid, man, you're missing the boat.
I'm just curious, how much fatty meat would a bodybuilder or anybody have to consume to get what they would be getting daily from X Factor?
It's quite a bit, actually. We get about 200 milligrams a day in our diet, 250 milligrams a day. The studies that we funded use 1,000 milligrams or 1,500 milligrams a day. Okay. I find that above 500 seems to be a good performance enhancing dose, but most people take a gram and a half.
I took 3 grams pre-workout with my meal, and I told you that I felt sore.
Yes, increased soreness is very common, but of course that's part of what we're trying to do. Muscle growth is about hurting yourself and repairing yourself.
I believe it can be stacked perfectly with creatine and HMB, perhaps, or leucine, beta-alanine also, some bicarbonate. Okay.
Yeah, none of those should conflict in any way with ARA. It's, ARA is like the top of the chain, and all these other things are lower on the chain. Testosterone is lower on the chain. Not that testosterone isn't one of the most dramatic ways that you can affect muscle growth, but it's part of a whole chain of events that is related to muscle growth. And in the years to come, I think we're going to keep learning more about it. It's, I'm not a religious person in any way at all. But when you look at the body and how complex it is, it's absolutely amazing what goes into just the process of muscle growth. How many different chemicals and hormones and activities take place to do that one thing. So I don't know. It's crazy, and we're learning at a rapid pace. So I think ARA is another real important part of that, and hopefully it'll help us learn even more about it.
Bill, any idea about your 12th edition? It's going to be next year, and perhaps some extra chapters included? Will be Thomas O'Connor also in it?
I'm not sure what the contributions are going to be. I haven't sat down for it yet. Right now, I'm deeply involved with relaunching menshealthcare.com. I'm not sure if we discussed this, but
Yes, we did a platform. It's a platform about
Did
finding.
we get, well, what we're doing with the relaunch is we started just referring people to doctors that do HRT. In the United States, testosterone is a controlled substance, which means there are restrictions on how it can be prescribed. And of course, there's penalties on possessing it without a prescription. But because of COVID, our FDA changed the rules. It used to be that drugs like testosterone, pain medications, tranquilizers, drugs that are what they consider drugs of abuse, you needed to go to a doctor in person to be managed by a doctor in person to get those prescriptions. Because of COVID, they've reduced. They've possibly temporarily. We don't know if it's going to be permanent because this may be a new way for healthcare. But they've eliminated that restriction. So now we can do testosterone replacement therapy 100% from your home, and that's
Online,
yeah, something that something that we've been working on. So we're in the final stages of it. I hope to have this relaunched the first week of January, but we will be a platform that will allow you to come on, sign up, get your blood testing at home with blood spot tests, do your physical evaluation with the help of, we're sending blood pressure monitors and heart rate monitors out, and video conferences, all done through video, telemedicine visits. But we can get somebody, provided they meet the requirements, we could get somebody on testosterone therapy without them ever having to leave their house, and then medicine gets shipped to their door. So as you know, I'm a tremendous advocate for hormone replacement therapy in men that are getting older. I know you are as well. There are many health benefits to it, and being able to connect people to that without them having to go out and deal with COVID, which is it's on fire right now in the United States, as is many other places. But we're dealing with a real mess here. Being able to do that from home to me is an awesome contribution, and we're excited to get that rolling. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks, Men's Healthcare will be live to take patients for this. So
wow,
so that's what
menshealthcare.com. Menshealthcare.com. Remember that one, guys.
Menshealthcare.com, easy to remember.
Yeah,
I hope. I'm a domain guy too. It's one of my side hobbies is investing in domains. So when we saw that, when I saw the opportunity to get that, I jumped on it. So,
Bill, one last question: why is it so hard for Europeans to get their own kit test overseas?
To get what? I'm sorry.
To get the steroid kit. You told me it's really hard to get
Roid test. Well, we have Roid test. We have a couple distributors. If you go to roidtest.com, we have an international tab that links you up to our distributors. We have a couple places in the UK that are carrying it. In mainland Europe, it's been we're working with somebody.
We can get it from England.
Yeah, England should ship. They should ship to Europe. Okay. We're looking for more distributors in mainland Europe. We're working with somebody in the Netherlands. But it's been tough to get full coverage in Europe, and with the way these it's an acid, it has to be shipped specially, and so it's best for us to deal with a reseller locally, but short of that, you could order it from the UK. I was going to send you back, but with a bunch, but you can't bring them on the plane. You can't.
Yeah.
It's a tiny bit of acid too. I mean, it's like
you told me that.
It's not going to hurt anything. It's not going to melt through a plane, but the rules are rules. So,
well, I think I need to thank you on behalf of all the PED users on the USA and beyond, because that Roid test kit has been a blessing for so many guys. There's so much bunk gear out there, so much.
Well, the flip side of the coin says it's a curse for the dealers.
Yeah, they don't. I'm sure a lot of the drug dealers or underground manufacturers and labs, they don't like Bill. They don't like him one bit, because they're trying to pawn off, vegetable oil or whatever, canola oil. I don't know.
90% of the market is fake, Bill, right? The underground labs.
You know what? I keep every time I look at a study, it seems a little worse in terms of what they find out. And often, a lot of times, we're just talking about the substance, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff that comes in as legitimate is still underground made and stuff like that. So there's a lot of concerns with the underground market, but we're excited what we've done with Roid Test, and
It was brilliant. It was pioneer, really. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we certainly can't take all the credit for it. When we jumped on the opportunity, it was because the technology was starting. It was out there, but we worked really closely with an amazing lab to refine it. What we brought to the table, which I think the labs that we're working on this didn't have, is we have an understanding of what's going on in the market. We have an understanding of, that low doses of, testosterone are often used for nandrolone. Winstrol, low doses of winstrol are often used.
Usually a cheaper product. An expensive product is faked by a cheaper. So Primo and Anavar, they are faked by, for instance, Acupos or Stenozolol.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to put a lower dose. I mean, testosterone and nandrolone, these are affordable compounds. You could do quite a lot with them. You could do quite a lot with D-bol and winstrol in terms of pretending it's other substances by just putting a little bit less in or a little bit more in of something. So there's a lot of ways that certainly that you can play with the
I think that you mentioned that 1 kilogram of methanolone cost 15 grand, right?
So, I haven't checked the prices recently. The most expensive was halotestin.
Yeah.
I want to say it was 20 or 30 or something. It's ridiculous. I tell people test your halotestin. It also produces a nice unique reaction too. I say if you want to know if your dealer is legit, your source is legit, buy halotestin. Because if they're substituting ingredients or they're not checking their ingredients, they don't have real halotestin. Somebody shipped them something else, and that's what they're using. And that's another thing where I put the blame on. I think a lot of the underground labs, look, it's an illegal business. Some people are just trying to make a buck and they don't care how they make it. But I think a lot of the underground labs are also run by steroid users. They care about what they're doing, but it's an illegal business. So they're
underdosed.
Well, yeah, or it could just be the substance. It could be the underdosed raw materials. But the bottom line is, if you're a lab, if you're a supplier in China selling illegal raw materials to an illegal lab in the United States or UK or something, what do you think the odds are that they're going to send your raw material out to a lab to have analyzed? Very low. So the supply, and also that's where the money is. There's not a lot of money in cutting testosterone in half in a bottle. Testosterone doesn't cost that much to put in a bottle anyway. But when they're selling a kilo of it, the difference between testosterone and trenbolone is very dramatic.
Yeah.
And it's like that with a lot of substances. Anavar, very expensive. Halotestin, of course, ridiculous. So there's a huge incentive for a lab to be like, am I going to ship this person a $30,000 kilo of halotestin, or am I going to ship them, some stanozolol or something, or methyl DHT? These things are cheap and easily available. Am I going to ship them that's cost me $700 or $1,200 and keep the other 28 grand? There's a huge incentive to do that. So as much as people put their ire at the underground labs, I do give them a little bit of slack because I feel like most of the problem is at the supply of the raw materials.
Let me just interject, because the Roid Test kit is probably even more important for females, because now we have all these women's divisions: bikini, figure, fitness. They're going to start wellness. They all use gear, all of them, every single women's division, women's physique, bodybuilding. And the problem obviously is virilization. If you're a woman, or if you're a coach who's supplying drugs to your client who's a female, and she thinks she's using Anavar and Primobolan, but she's actually using Anadrol and Tren, you're going to have an issue. You're going to have severe virilization for this poor girl. Irreversible in most cases.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tell you, Anavar is one of the worst, because that's exactly what we have. We have a lot of female athletes that buy just our Anavar test, for example, because that's what they use.
Yeah.
And so many of those tests come back that appears to be D-bol or stanozolol. They put a low dose in, hoping that it's not going to cause a problem, hoping that you're not going to notice. But that one is bad. Most of the Anavar that's on the black market is not Anavar.
Wow.
So that's one of the substances that I would encourage any female athlete, test that for sure.
Better take Winstrol.
Yeah. Or even if you're gonna do Winstrol, make sure you know what you're doing and you take a very low dose of it. But obviously Anavar is a better substance for virilization. And our most popular test is probably testosterone. And now we have the new semi-quantitative, which is good to see if you're getting accurately dosed. But testosterone is probably one of the most secure substances because it's so cheap.
Yeah.
So in terms of substituting, there's not much you're going to substitute in a vial of testosterone except less testosterone.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. So I think that's one of the things that we really brought to the table. And also I will take credit for somewhat for the semi-quantitative because I had proposed the idea of how to control the exact amount of drops that we were putting into the sample to give a specific color reaction. But the team at the lab really gets most of the credit there. The guys are amazing. We've got a great team we're working with. A couple teams we're working with, actually, depending on the test. The GH test is separate lab, but very, very proud of the work. Thank you for saying that, certainly, Ron, and George, for your support on that. We're going to keep up with that and keep innovating when we can.
Cool. Well, Mr. Llewellyn, thank you so much for being guest today. Dr. T, thanks for having him. Thanks for it was all your idea and your arrangement. Yeah, guys, I would get out there on Amazon.com. You can get Anabolics 11th edition. Very, very informative. It's 832 pages, but this is actual scientific information, not some bro science from some 22-year-old online who happens to have decent genetics, so you're going to think he's an authority. Roidtest.com. Find out if your gear is real. And there's also the new way. That's what I've been waiting for, is how much is in it, the quantitative analysis. That's a huge breakthrough. I never even thought that was going to happen. And molecularnutrition.com, is that the site?
Yep.
Okay, that's where you can get X Factor, the original and probably still the best Arachidonic Acid supplement available today. Yes. Cool. Well, guys, thank you.
Thanks for having me on.
Cool. All right. Everybody, thanks for watching Ask Dr. Testosterone. We'll see you next time.